Earlier this week, friend of the channel, Wendell of Level 1 Techs, put out what can only be described as an excellent piece of investigatory journalism that blew the doors off an issue this channel has been covering for a long time now. And I want to be clear about that this has been building in the public zeitgeist for a while, that at least this channel months ago also reported that retailers and system integrators that I have spoken with are appalled at the 13th gen and 14th gen failure rates. In fact, even last month I ran a report detailing that devs are growing hopelessly frustrated too. But you know, when I saw this video from Wendell, I knew the story wasn't going to stay at a simmer anymore, that it was going to boil over. I knew this was going to happen because he had the data that irrefutably showed that the issue was not just AIBs pushing the chips too hard, and even seemed to suggest that there could be genuinely a fatal flaw in the Raptor Lake design, which now developers are even openly saying just that, and other websites and outlets are therefore blowing the story into the stratosphere. And I want to be clear, I'm not hearing things are getting any better right now. Today I had a call with one of my OEM/server sources. This person, who is an integration engineer at a major OEM, wanted to reach out to me to talk about the possibility that Raptor Lake really might need to be recalled. Based on the extensive failure data this person had seen, they were starting to suspect that the issue may stem from changes Intel made to the cache in the design between Alder Lake and Raptor Lake. Now, this is just a theory the person was throwing out, but they suspect that something around the area connecting the cores to the cache is getting worn out in models with more cores than the original design was prepared for. This would explain why the issue seems to mostly involve the highest core count models. Although it might eventually affect models below that, it would show up in these types of models first, where this would be the issue. And it makes sense because it doesn't seem like voltage is the key issue here, that if you run even lower powered models for a long time, that they will eventually break. It also explains why disabling E-cores sometimes fixes the problems depending on where the break happened. And well, this person's also just terrified that all of the non-rebrand Raptor Lake models, because remember, some things that were labeled as Raptor Lake were really just rebrands of Alder Lake, but this person is worried that eventually they might even start seeing Raptor Lake laptop chips, and like half of the gaming desktops that they sell have to be returned because that would cost them a boatload of money. And you know, then I started thinking about something that I had almost forgotten. Raptor Lake, as far as I could tell back in the day, was thrown together really quickly. Like, this is some behind-the-scenes info here, but I don't remember really hearing about Raptor Lake at all from any of my sources in 2019 or 2020. Maybe end of 2020, but I think, to my memory, it was like earlier mid-2021, where just out of the blue, some of my intel sources were like, there's this thing called Raptor Lake, which is really weird. In fact, I believe I had heard of Panther Lake, the name at least, before I had heard of Raptor Lake, which would tell you it was probably cobbled together quickly as some stopgap generation between Alder Lake and ARL Lake. And then I actually reached out to one of my intel sources today, and the person confirmed that Raptor Lake was created in record time, that the people who worked on it used to brag at lunch that they managed to go from drawings to product launch in just 11 months and still beat Zen 4, I suppose they probably said with a smug face. But was it worth it? They managed to do this in 11 months. I think it's very likely then that what happened is, as they were copying over parts of the Alder Lake design to Raptor Lake, that either in one option here, they just have something that isn't good enough to handle the increased core counts of Raptor Lake, and that's what's breaking. Or I guess maybe it's not a fundamental flaw. Maybe they should have done some sort of long-term validation testing that would catch that one defect would lead to a higher core count part breaking eventually. In other words, like, oh, if you see this defect, I know it works right now with 24 cores, but we should disable this down to an i5 because eventually it's going to break if we do that. That's the sort of thing I used to see sometimes. If anyone remembers those Athlon x3 or Phenom 2 x3 triple core products a long time ago. I'm dating myself here, but you know, you would sometimes enable in the BIOS of your motherboard, it'd be, you'd buy a 3-core product, and then you'd enable it to be 4 cores, and then eventually it would just break, and you'd go, oh, what happened is, it was probably actually, it was meant to be a triple core, and it was only able to work as a quad core for a limited amount of time. I don't know if it's that. If that were to be the case, then Intel would need to recall what they have out there right now, but then find a way to figure out which ones are going to become that, fix that, and then the issue will cost them a lot, but then go away. But I have to say, I do also just think it's plausible that this is a fundamental flaw in the truly new Raptor Lake dies, and that it could mean that eventually all of them will just start breaking, and if that happens, I don't know how Intel will survive that. But my point is, in opening up the video with this Intel stability information, is that Intel really needs to move past Raptor Lake as quickly as they can. I mean, I've been reporting that they basically meant to make that their flagship chip design for another year or so. I don't think they can afford to do that. I think there's going to be a lot riding on Arrow Lake that will use TSMC 3 nanometer and on the Meteor Lake refresh that will be using Intel 3. That's right, I'm leaking multiple core architectures that will be coming from Intel next year, but first, an ad from a sponsor. This piece of content is brought to you by the 25,000 mAh 145 watt Ugreen Nexode power bank. This power bank offers 140 watts of fast charging from that first USB-C port thanks to the latest PD 3.1 and QC 3.0 technologies. But it has another USB-C port that goes up to 65 watts and a USB-A port that goes up to 22.5 watts. All of this means is that with its massive capacity, you can charge a MacBook Pro 14-inch almost to full capacity from zero, a Galaxy S23 Ultra 3.6 times, and an iPhone 15 up to 5.2 times. You can plug in multiple devices. In my case, I can fully charge my laptop, my smartwatch, and my smartphone fully on a single charge, and that is just absolutely crazy when you think about it. And it is quick. It can charge a MacBook Pro 16-inch to 56% in just 30 minutes. And you know, if you want to recharge it quickly as well, it has a 65-watt input that can fully charge in 2 hours, which is important considering its high capacity. So if you have the new 65-watt Nexode Pro Cookie, by the way, which is seriously half the size of my wallet, this thing is also awesome. You can take this little thing and then this little power bank and fully charge it in 2 hours on the go. And so if you want to support Moore's Law is Dead or get your hands on one of these fantastic products, follow the directions in the links below in the description to support this channel and also get the best deals on these products. Just clicking on those links helps Moore's Law is Dead a ton, of course, but buying one of these, if you're in the market for power gear, helps even more. So check out Ugreen's products at the links below today. All right, so let's not waste any time here. Let's get right to this Intel Core roadmap update. And we will start with Arrow Lake that will be launching at the end of this year. And I do believe it will launch probably sometime in November or December. But the reason I still say Q4 2024 / first half of 2025 is that I still hear some people think that it will be a miracle if they manage to even launch in December just to desktop with the K SKUs. And even if they do, and I think they probably will, but you know, if they launch, you know, the top gaming desktop chips in December this year, the overwhelming majority of the lineup is still going to come out in the first half of next year. So you should really think about this as a product that's starting to roll out at the end of this year. Won't fully be out until we're in the first half of next year. And Desktop Lion Cove, or LNC, is projected to offer a 15 to 25% IPC uplift over Raptor Lake. Now, the range is a bit lower than what I used to report, but I cannot say that I am hearing the same thing some of the most pessimistic people are hearing. So I would consider that good news. I still think it's plausible. Intel will get to 20%, and I do expect at least 15% higher IPC over Raptor Lake with Lion Cove. And that is because the implementation for Arrow Lake is better than the implementation of Lion Cove for Lunar Lake. Now, Desktop Arrow Lake is currently projected, therefore, to offer 10 to 20% higher single threading and 20 to 35% higher multi-threading performance over Raptor Lake Refresh. Now, that may seem like bigger ranges, and it's in white text, not the more confident deep blue text, and that is because there is still decent uncertainty over what the final total performance will be due to clock speeds, voltage curves, TDPs, and microcode not being finalized yet. Really think about this, people. I think that Arrow Lake is likely to be clocked at least a bit below Raptor Lake from what I'm hearing, but not necessarily crazy lower. And they're not sure yet where it's going to hit. And again, let me remind you, that is why I say it might not even launch until December. They're still not even sure what clock speeds they'll be able to hit. They still aren't sure what they want for the stock voltage, and then they'll do final SOC tweaking based on that. And they're still not sure what they want the final TDPs to be. I've heard things that are like, I think a PL2 that's above 200 watts, or I think it's 225, 253 watts or something. But I'm told it's not final, so there's no point to me leaking it. You know, what TDP and what max clocks they are able to achieve, that is going to tell us if it's on the higher end of the single threading uplift over Raptor Lake, or if maybe it just doesn't clock as high and they're going for efficiency, it's a more modest uplift. But anyways, let's continue here. Meteor Lake Refresh now. This uses an enhanced Redwood Cove, and Crestmont on Intel 3, not on Intel 4, and it is projected to offer 15% higher performance or 20% lower power at the same performance level compared to Meteor Lake. And so, yeah, Meteor Lake R is not a simple tweak of Meteor Lake. It is using a newer node, and I'm being told that the new core topology is similar to ARL Lake. They're actually moving around where the cores are on the dial. Still be on the same compute tile, but it might be changed if the E cores are like next to or between some of the P cores is basically what I was told. And so it is actually more than just a plus. It will be a better product than Meteor Lake. I even had some people describe it as fixed Meteor Lake. And so, yes, most of the ARL Lake lineup will leverage Lion Cove for the P cores and Skymont for the E cores. However, and this is the sketchy part, I'm told that there's something called ARL-U that actually uses a new variant of Meteor Lake R for the compute tiles. And so let's go down to what that means. So the top desktop chips with 8 P cores and 16 E cores, that's going to use TSMC M3B, as this channel exclusively leaked last year. And of course, that will also be used for extreme laptops and then desktop i5K through i9KS. I'm actually told something interesting here, which is that it supposedly reuses the canceled Meteor Lake S. That's supposed to be the flagship high-end gaming desktop Meteor Lake variant that was canceled. Again, that this channel exclusively leaked was canceled. Yeah, apparently they're still using the same SoC tile that they developed for that. Below that will be 6 plus 8 plus 2, so still low power E-cores, ARL Lake H. Now, this is still on TSMC M3B. That means it's still the strongest version of Lion Cove, and it still has Skymont. Then you go down to Intel 20A for a more high volume, more controlled node that they're going to use for the weaker ARL Lake S. I'm told that right now this is planned to be used for non-K i5s and lower so that it's cheaper for them and they can spit out a ton of them. But no, it is not expected to perform as well as the N3B products. Now below that then is when we get to Intel 3 being used for 6 plus 8 plus 2 ARL Lake U, which is really like Meteor Lake Plus in there. It's going to use this cheaper but better than what Meteor Lake uses now node for mainstream laptops so they can spit out a ton of these things. And what you can really see here is that Intel really is planning to go for a market share with ARL Lake. They want to have the best nodes for the most premium products, but then when it comes to the lower end desktop and laptop parts, they're using two different nodes that they control so they don't have capacity issues. And yeah, I do think actually that ARL Lake U, if it is like 20% better than Meteor Lake, to me, that sounds like something that could be as good or a bit better than Hawkpoint, and therefore compete with the successor to Hawkpoint, Escher, that AMD is launching next year. All right, now here's some more details. ARL Lake H and ARL Lake S include an NPU capable of 13 tops. Again, this was something this channel exclusively leaked months ago, but something new that I'm hearing about this is that ARL Lake S, again, that's the top-end gaming desktop ARL Lake, has something called machine learning thread scheduling. I think this is probably going to be some sort of APO 2.0 that is only going to be on ARL Lake S because ARL Lake S is a desktop part, and therefore they don't care if they're wasting powering on the NPU constantly for scheduling when it needs to. But that's an interesting thing that I've heard. Additionally, I've heard that the integrated graphics in mobile ARL Lake contain 8 Alchemist Plus XE cores, so pretty much just a plus of what's in Meteor Lake's integrated graphics right now. But I am told it should offer more performance. I'm not going to double down on a number here, but I think it could offer up to 10 or 20% more performance. Again, that would still be while using a lot more energy, though. You know, that's not me saying it's like Lunar Lake, where it's able to get to a higher level of performance at much lower power. Which, on that note, early gaming benchmarks that I was able to see this week show 30-watt Lunar Lake sample performing around 20% faster than a 65-watt Meteor Lake sample in gaming, which is really exciting. But then also over 50% faster when both are clocked below 20 watts. And I've had suggested to me that if you were to put Lunar Lake down to 10 or 17 watts, or it might double performance of Meteor Lake in some scenarios with integrated graphics. So that's pretty exciting. What that tells you, though, is that it is unlikely, I think, to crush Strix at really high clocks, but that in its planned niche, it should be competitive with Strix from what I'm hearing, in integrated graphics performance at least. Now, an ARL Lake refresh is targeting the second half of 2025 for launch, and it will leverage a faster NPU that is Copilot Plus ready. However, I unfortunately have to report to you all today that the 8 plus 32 core tile was canceled due to bandwidth limitations and cost concerns. Basically, what I was told from multiple sources on this one is that they didn't think they had the bandwidth necessary to power it. They were having problems with the ring bus going to that many cores, and that also it was just starting to cost a boatload of money, and they didn't think it would be worth it, especially because Intel was worried that all people would care about is how strong its NPU is. We'll see if anyone really cares about NPUs in a year, but at a minimum, it seems like they're just focusing on sort of like a Intel 14th gen situation again, where it's going to have higher boost clocks than the first version of Arrow Lake. It's going to have voltage tweaks and a few bells and whistles. And this time, I suppose, it will have a much better NPU, but it doesn't sound wildly stronger in performance, certainly not multi-threading compared to the previous gen, like I was hearing it could be for a long time now. Let's move on to Panther Lake to round this out here. So Q4 2025, that one, of course, is in lighter text for the date because Panther Lake, I think they're going to try to get out as soon as possible. Wouldn't surprise me if they managed to get it out. Maybe like a paper launch in Q3, but I'm still hearing Q4. And it has up to 4 big cores, 8 little cores, and then 4 low-power little cores. Now, that's Darkmont for the E cores, both low-power and the non-low power. And Cougar Cove is this channel exclusively leaked for the P cores. Now, the LPE cores, I am told, are expected to be fully usable by most apps. Yes, they will be much weaker than the normal E cores, and they will, of course, not clock as high probably and be lower power, but I'm told that, they will actually be very usable and boost performance much more than the Meteor Lake LPE cores ever could. So that sounds exciting to me, and I hope that works out. Now, Cougar Cove is expected to bring a 5 to 13% increase in IPC. Basically, I'm expecting single digits, but some people think it could get a bit above 10%. And again, it's not getting rentable units or hyper-threading, so this still isn't the big Jim Keller architecture. And then Darkmont, I don't know, minor IPC increase. Think of it like Crestmont, maybe a bit better than what Crestmont got. But I still think that's fairly impressive because it will be, if it launches on time, maybe at least for a month, be competing just with Zen 5. And that means it should have a firm IPC advantage, actually, as well. And yeah, it's targeting 17 to 30 watt form factors, just like Lunar Lake. If it gets these performance increases and maintains same power or close to that, I think it's going to be really cool, especially because it has 12 Celestial XE cores, which is a 50% increase in core counts from the graphics in Lunar Lake. And might be bandwidth limited, so I wouldn't take that to mean it will definitely be 50% faster, but that means it could be 50% faster integrated graphics performance over what is in Lunar Lake. And Lunar Lake is probably going to perform around a 1660, at least 1650 boost. I mean, I think that means you're getting to a situation where you could have 2060 or maybe even 3060 max Q performance in a 30 watt thin and light laptop. And if they pull that out, that'd be awesome. Also, I'm hearing, but this is very early, again, provisional confidence on this one, that the MPU could be 80 to 120 tops, but nobody is confident on what the final number will be. That just seems to be about where it's going to be right now. And so do I think? Well, when it comes to on-paper performance, I actually think that Meteor Lake Refresh, starting with that, sounds kind of good. Don't get me wrong, I first rolled my eyes at the idea of Intel rebranding Meteor Lake and calling it Arrow Lake, but it isn't a rebrand. It is actually a new iteration of Meteor Lake. And on paper, if you get past the fact that they might pretend it's Arrow Lake, it actually sounds pretty good. It should use a cheaper node than Arrow Lake does, while still getting a double-digit performance and efficiency boost over Meteor Lake, which means that it should at least match Hawkpoint, if not Escher, and therefore Intel will have a budget high-volume offering to combat all of those cheaper rebrands AMD has been flooding into the laptop market. But again, I wouldn't have that big of a problem with them grouping Meteor Lake Refresh chips into the same family or generation as the Arrow Lake mobile chips, but they better, if it's in a product description on like Newegg or on HP's website, if they say the architecture name, it better say Meteor Lake Refresh instead of just, ARL-U, because it really is a different product. Like when you go to Intel Arc and look up the name of the processor, it better actually say Meteor Lake Refresh, not product formerly known as Arrow Lake or something like they did when they rebranded Alder Lake products into Raptor Lake products. But as long as they make it clear somewhere that it isn't Arrow Lake, then I don't know, it's really no different than AMD putting Zen 3 products in a mostly Zen 4 lineup. But moving on, I think Panther Lake actually looks incredibly competitive if it launches before Zen 6. If it manages even a 10% IPC increase over Lunar Lake, and with 16 much more capable cores than the 8 cores in Lunar Lake, yeah, that will probably bring strict CPU performance, or better when it's in the single threading, and I don't know, possibly dedicated RTX 2060 or 3060 Max Q performance to 30 watt laptops. And while I think that that would be likely to overall be the best product in the 30 watt category against what AMD will have, I'm not 100% sure of that, though, and it's not like AMD won't have an answer. Remember, I just leaked that Strix Halo uses 3 nanometer for its 40 compute unit contained I/O die, and so it's not going to be as big as I think you would think. Like, I think Strix Halo's overall die size will overall be using more silicon than Panther Lake, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I don't think it'll be crazy bigger. It's somewhat reasonably sized, and it will be cut down into things as small as Strix Halo low power that I've leaked that will plan to bring performance pretty close to what it sounds like Panther Lake will bring in those power profiles. So I expect Strix Halo to be less efficient in the lower end compared to Panther Lake, for the performance you'll get, but I'm not 100% sure it will be, and AMD will have an answer, and an answer that launches, I think, at least half a year before Panther Lake. So it's not like Panther Lake will be a complete slam dunk. And again, it needs to come out as soon as possible, because if it comes out at the very end of next year, or it slips to 2026, AMD is going to have Zen 6 Medusa APUs, and while I haven't leaked the specs on what some of those Medusa Halo products will be, from what I've heard in some whispers, it might be a lot stronger than Strix Halo, actually. And so Intel's going to need to capitalize on that narrow amount of time where they really do have this IPC lead and this efficiency lead that AMD can't compete with until their Zen 6 products are out. And all of this talk about timing and pricing, well, that gets me to what I want to say about Arrow Lake's competitiveness with Zen 5. And it's that, yep, just like I've kind of said about a bunch of these other Intel things that I'm leaking today, on paper, Intel looks competitive. But what about the fact that AMD will have been waging a price war, as I've leaked, with aggressively priced Zen 5 products that have industry-beating performance for 3 to 6 months before Arrow Lake is even out? And then once Arrow Lake does come out, what about Zen 5 X3D? Well, I think Arrow Lake is going to beat standard Zen 5, or it could. I don't think it's going to beat Zen 5 X3D in gaming. And with the fact that Arrow Lake Refresh is only going to be a clock speed uplift with a new NPU, I get the feeling that Zen 5 X3D may dominate gaming performance until, Nova Lake is out? And then what is Arrow Lake Refresh going to do against Zen 6? I don't know, especially with the damage I think the ongoing Raptor Lake instability issues is doing to Intel's mindshare right now, which, by the way, is already lower than AMD's before we bring up the instability issues. I just worry that small, expensive wins here and there, which is what it seems like Intel's going to manage, might not be enough to fundamentally keep Intel in the black. But hey, at least from what I'm hearing, Arrow Lake isn't a complete disaster. I am not hearing the most pessimistic things that I've seen out there right now. And at least it seems like Panther Lake will be very competitive if it launches on time. So let's end on that. Let's end on a good note. That Intel's future products do look bright. It's just that I hope their dark past doesn't drag down their future with them. And all right, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please remember to like it, to share it, to comment down below for the algorithm, and then to subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring that bell button. Subscribing to the YouTube channel helps so much, and actually what would help even more is if you join Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. There you'll get access to hundreds of exclusive pieces of content that never have any ads. A new video just came out, a die shrink about the reporting by Wendell on Intel's instability issues. Me and Dan talk about that for a while, and that's just bonus content there for you if you join the lowest tier. And there's, of course, tons of other stuff there that you'll get at the higher tiers as well, so please check that out. And then, of course, no matter what, though, if you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching.